First speaker this morning hosts a fabulous show for us called The Art Assignment. She's really one of the most innovative thinkers out there in the art world today. Before she did the series that she'll be talking about a little bit for us, she co-authored the book Andy Warhol Enterprises, Graphite Magazine, holds a master's degree from Columbia. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Urist Green. Have fun.
So in the spring of 2013, I was sitting in a conference room at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, where I was working as a curator of contemporary art. In that role, I had the pleasure of commissioning artists to create installations such as this one in the lobby of the museum by the artist Spencer Finch. Titled Following Nature, it's a reconsideration of Monet's gardens at Giverny, with the array of hanging glass at the center representing the pond, and the colored gels on the surrounding windows an abstraction of the surrounding gardens. I loved this kind of work, thinking carefully about the Indianapolis audience, and then working directly with artists to think about what that audience might want to see, and then bringing new works into the world. But back to that conference room, because that's where I was spending a good deal of my time. These days, museums are in a bit of a crisis about engagement. A lot of fields are, but I think especially place-based institutions like museums are struggling with the twin goals of bringing real bodies into the door, while also attracting an ever-expanding potential audience online. As a museum curator, I worked on a wide variety of projects where we were trying to do just that. I helped develop a park adjacent to the museum called 100 Acres, whose express goal is to rethink what a sculpture park should be in the 21st century. It included installations like this one by Kim Beck called Notice, a Flock of Signs. That's a clever play on the often overabundance of signage in museums and botanical gardens. The park is a place that fosters flexibility and play and welcomes people who might be hesitant to spend time in cold, quiet galleries. But even with the success of projects like this one, a lot of our online engagement projects struggled to reach very many people, and we often couldn't reach outside of the often insular world of contemporary art. Okay, so picture me in epically long meetings at the museum talking about engagement and how to get more and new and different and younger and richer, but also poorer people to come to the museum. When I have this guy in my basement making videos and getting literally millions of views from all over the world from all walks of life. This person is my husband, John Green, who writes young adult novels and who also has a variety of YouTube channels that address everything from AP World History to video games to giraffe mating to the Affordable Care Act. He had this vast and fulfilling online life and felt a real part of this large and usually nurturing community where they discuss things and debate things and also raise money for charity. That community rose up around the first video blog that John and his brother Hank started in 2007. The same year I finished graduate school and John and I moved to Indianapolis for my job at the museum. Over the ensuing years, I tried to keep my blinders on to the seductions of the internet. But over time, I couldn't help but become captivated by the internet's potential. There was just tremendous creation happening on platforms like Tumblr. And those creations were being shared and remixed and commented upon broadly in much the same way we in the museum hoped art would be. And I was so impressed by the speed with which a creative action or an idea could spread. And I also couldn't help but draw connections and find that some memes weren't too dissimilar from things contemporary artists were doing. Like when I saw planking, I couldn't help but think of this photo series by Lily McElroy called I Throw Myself at Men, where she'd go into bars and have herself photographed literally throwing herself at men. And when I saw the meme Young Me, Now Me, I couldn't help but remember the pioneering work of the artist Cindy Sherman, who for decades has taken on numerous guises to explore the complex workings of identity. And when I saw animated GIFs, can pause and enjoy this for a moment. I remembered some of the earliest video art of artists like Jack Goldstein, who made this video. I'll let it run for a second. So this piece is from 1975, and it's called Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and it's just the MGM lion roar in a continual loop. It was that very same seeming lack of seriousness that made me dubious to call GIFs and memes real art that was part of what made online content so enjoyable. And I started to wonder if there were a way that we could talk about things people were doing and making on the internet in a more critically engaged way and link it to things that had been done in the past. And so one day, when John came to have lunch with me at the museum one day, and he asked me if I might have any ideas for a web series to pitch to PBS Digital Studios, I couldn't really silence my good sense anymore, and I knew it was time to give it a go. So I started to formulate an idea that would take advantage of the immense amount of creative activity already happening online, and also start to think about the internet as a place where real art and real engagement can happen. And so I proposed a series called The Art Assignment, where I visit artists around the country and commission them to create assignments for the audience. We talk about the assignment, how it relates to their works. I put it in art historical context, and then each episode is an open call for people to respond and post their responses to social media platforms and hashtag it with The Art Assignment. It premiered in February of 2014, and you can get a sense of it here.
Are you trying to be as tall as me?
I am as tall as you.
No, you are clearly not. You are cheating.
Hi, I'm Florian. I'm Jim.
I'm Toye Onutala.
I'm David Brooks.
I'm Deb Sokola.
I'm Kate Gilmore.
And this is our art assignment.
Your assignment is
Find someone, draw a line between the two of you.
Articulate something
That is indispensable to you.
and when it looks cool, you're done.
I think this assignment is super interesting. It asks you to think about what's going to happen in the scope of your life and kind of acknowledge that you're only here for a short time, and what in this short time are you likely to see and not see.
I mean, like, why is that art?
Art doesn't have to be an object or material. It can be something, like Roy Ascott said, like triggers for experiences instead.
Almost like looking through, suddenly you're wearing special glasses and you can see these little details which you wouldn't otherwise.
It's really just a question of how are you going to use the resources at your disposal, use the particular life that you have to try to make the assignment happen.
Yes! Successful art!
This is a big question how you can create new interactions, allow people to get out of the box.
I find that I like kind of getting lost in the act of drawing. It's like a form of prayer in a way.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Doug. How you doing, Bill? Good. You too.
Right? It's about reimagining the way you understand space.
You're just doing something you never think to do.
With this series, I'm able to share my favorite parts about being a curator, and that's working directly with artists and seeing the astounding variety of ways they approach problems and think about the world. It never seemed fair to me when I'd stand in a museum gallery and realize that I was the only one who got to see that artist's workspace, to meet their dog, to talk to them in depth about their process, and have the rare pleasure of learning about a thing directly from the person who made it. And throughout all of these assignments, I've actually realized, and through doing this, that I've actually kind of designed my dream job. I get to drop in on the brightest minds across the country and ask them to create challenges for an audience who may know a lot about art or who may know very little. And when it first started, we didn't actually know if people would do these assignments. But thankfully, and to my great relief, they do. We actually had to rethink the format of the show soon after it started because we were getting a lot of responses and we really wanted to showcase all the great work that people were doing. So instead of having a new assignment every week, we now alternate assignment videos with those showcasing viewer responses and also talking about topics that come up in the comments. And there are importantly no due dates. These videos are designed to be evergreen, able to be used at home or in the classroom today or far into the future. And we constantly prowl the internet, searching for the art assignment hashtags and then sharing responses we find interesting. One of our first assignments, and one of my favorites, came from New York-based artist David Brooks. He gave an assignment we called Never Seen, Never Will. And that's to articulate a thing that exists in the world, but that you've never seen before and probably will never see in your life. We received hundreds of responses, but I'll share with you just a few. This one was made by a Swiss citizen who was thinking about their upcoming required military service and feeling very lucky to live in a stable country, especially in light of crises in Ukraine and Syria. They said that they'd only heard about war on TV and in the media, but never actually lived it and hoped they never had to. This is a tissue paper sculpture of a scimitar oryx extinct in the wild. T. Stone chose her brain as her never seen, never will. This is one of my favorite by Damn Smart Blue Boxes, and it's a representation of publicly accessible casual space travel. And this, by Why in the Night Sky, is a portrait of the artist's father, whom they'd never met or even seen a picture of. Throughout this series, I've thought a lot about how to strike the right tone, how to present nuanced material thoughtfully, but in a way that might actually be fun to watch. Art video is too often painfully slow, full of long pauses, the artist staring into the middle distance, ruminating on their singular genius. And I was remembering this thing that New York Magazine does, called the Approval Matrix. I don't usually look at it, but in March of 2012, they featured the guy who makes videos in my basement. And we were amused to find his crash course videos situated in the brilliant lowbrow quadrant, between the four poles of highbrow, lowbrow, despicable, and brilliant. I also noticed that a great book about art assignments called Draw It With Your Eyes Closed was on the very same matrix, but situated firmly on the highbrow edge of things. Now, you of course want to be on the brilliant side, but it was that highbrow, lowbrow spectrum that really got me thinking. The worlds of art history and contemporary art are notorious for being highbrow, but I want desperately to chip away at that reputation. I take art very seriously, but I don't think talking about art needs to be serious. Each episode features an animated sequence that brings to life a historical precedence for the given activity. Like for the Never Seen, Never Will assignment, we talked about explorer William Beebe and how he used to go on deep sea dives and then radio up to an artist who was on deck, and he would describe what he saw. She would then make these amazing paintings of those creations, knowing that she would never actually see those things with her own eyes. With this series, I'm constantly trying to strike a balance between fun and conceptually rigorous in a way that gains new viewers, but that also maintains my art historical street cred. I'm trying to navigate that right, brilliant side of the matrix in a way that attracts people who already like art and also those who don't. And as it happens, I do think artists can be geniuses. But I don't think presenting them as such is the best vehicle for getting people to care about art. Artists are hardworking people with really great ideas whose work has direct bearing on contemporary life, but they're just people. And I think by giving a brief and hopefully unintimidating glimpse into their lives and their thought processes, and by having them share with you a challenge that's proved useful for them, that you might learn a little something about the hugely diverse and surprising realm of art, and maybe be more likely to go out of your way to see art, and then once you get there, to have a better experience with art. The art assignment now has over 100,000 subscribers and more than 1.5 million channel views. But I'm much less interested in those numbers than in the fact that people are watching this show and then actually making things. It's that hard evidence of engagement that's so rare and so wonderful. A fervent community has built up around the art assignment, and I'm impressed on a daily basis by the quality of the comments and reactions to the ideas we present. It's through seeing what that community makes and communicating with them online that I feel like this project is worthwhile. and making a small bit of progress in proving what I firmly believe to be true, that art is relevant to our lives.
It's a fascinating series. What I love about it is exactly that last topic you talked about, that we're in this age where anyone with one of these can create, and yet the image of fine art is highbrow. That's got to drive you crazy, right?
No, I mean, it doesn't actually. It used to. I used to be more uncomfortable with those divisions and to say, you know, memes and GIFs and those fun, enjoyable things aren't art. But I think that that's an error. I think that it's all in how you frame it and how you think about it. So I'm much more open-minded now. And I'm accepting if you don't think memes and GIFs are real art, good on you. You know, like that's, I believe that's fine.
Are those sorts of conversations and debates held among, you know, those people who have art history street cred?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of debate about, you know, everybody's a curator these days, right? And a lot of, you know, art curators who've been to school and have PhDs in art history and who are curators in that way are a little sensitive when, you know, somebody who, you know, has a Tumblr is a curator. But I think that's great. I think it's great that more people know what a curator is. And I think, you know, there are many ways to be one.
So one of the art assignments was to create a rug.
Yes.
And the technique shown, I recognized it instantly because my grandma used to do that.
Yeah.
She used to take, you know, she grew up in the Depression, all these little scraps of leftover fabric from sewing projects, and, you know, they'd be sitting in the middle of her living room. When did that sort of creativity sort of leave the everyday experience? And do you see that coming back now?
Well, definitely. Recently, there's been a resurgence or an emergence of what's called social practice. And the artist who issued that assignment, his name is Fritz Haig. And he does a lot of work that sort of thinks about the domestic realm and then brings it into the art museum. So his assignment was to take discarded clothes, t-shirts, textiles, create strips, and then hand crochet them into this rug that's kind of a representation of your past, of where you've been, and then it grows. But if you think about the fact that he would do these things in a communal setting and with the community of a said museum and then present it in the community, suddenly the museum isn't this place that's only about other people who've had this sort of singular act of genius, but it's about something we make together and a space that we occupy together.
That actually leads to one of the questions that came from the audience. You take art very seriously, and yet you talk about it very casually. Not everybody does. Why is it that so many conversations about art become intimidating and become almost walled off and inaccessible?
Well, I think there's a long history of art being for the upper classes. I mean, if you go back to the Renaissance, it's not that artists were well-to-do, but they were supported by wealthy families. And I think the market has a lot to do with art being presented as a luxury good. But the truth of the matter is that artists are people, as I said. And if you actually have the privilege of sort of getting to know artists and seeing them on a daily basis, you see very quickly that they're not intimidating people. Often if you see them and they look standoffish at a museum or a gallery, it's because they're terribly uncomfortable and don't want to be there. So I think, I think there's just a lot of ways that it would behoove all of us in the art world and outside of it to sort of break down that facade of cool and showiness and just sort of show art and talk about it for what it is.
Well, and I take it that's why in producing some of the segments, you're just showing them, it's almost like they're in their native habitat.
Yeah.
They're in their studio, but they're just guys and women sitting there with stuff all around.
Yeah.
Now that breaks down that wall in terms of accessibility. They still got to earn a living.
Yeah.
How do you hope that your work either connects people back to museums to continue to support their important curatorial work, or to galleries, or in other ways that actually support the creation.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I really liked working inside of museums, and I still firmly believe in the museum as an institution, but I felt like for myself I could do better work for the museum if I left it. Because I think a lot of times for a lot of fields, if you make videos inside that institution, it always has that kind of stink of selling. But if you can exit it and approach it from a different angle. I mean, I make other videos about, I made a video for the art assignment called How to Visit a Museum. And it's just about not being intimidated to go up to the desk and get a map, and not be intimidated to ask a guard, hey, can I take a picture? And to simple things like that that make the museum experience better.
And to throw $5 in the
Right.
little...
Yeah, if you've got it. Or you can go on the free day if that, if that's what works. But I think there's so many things that we can do through shows like this and other initiatives to break down those walls.
Talk more about that. How can you stretch that same approach, say, to schools or to community nonprofits or other people who can really engage different groups in a community?
Yeah, well, I think we've done a few projects with this where you can do art assignments as a group. And I think a lot of young people go to museums for the first time for a school trip, but then they don't go back, and then they don't go frequently as an adult. And for me, a lot of what I kind of drive home with this series is that it's okay to step into an art gallery and feel uncomfortable and not understand. Because to be honest, I walk into a gallery and I don't know everything that's on the walls, but I'm comfortable enough to say, I don't know what this is. Why don't I do a little research? I'll read the label, and sometimes I'll be like, still don't like it, still don't get it. But I'm comfortable enough to say that. So I think if more people were able to look at art and feel comfortable saying, I like it, I don't like it, maybe I want to find out more, maybe I don't. I think that's all part of this.
So here's a question that I'm going to be throwing out to just about everybody this morning. Art is not divorced from the rest of the world. We're talking throughout the conference here about the power of art and media and all these different realms to create community impact, to create influence. How do you envision art and design fitting into the work of, say, social entrepreneurs, of an entire generation that's out there now trying to change the world and make it better? How should some of those people be thinking about art and design to achieve their goals?
Yeah. Well, the field of art is so broad now, and while you were talking, I was thinking about our very first assignment, which was called Meet in the Middle. And it's where you select a person and you calculate a friend, somebody that you know, a family member, and you calculate the exact geographical midpoint between you and that person. And then you decide on a date and a time, and you meet there, and you don't communicate along the way. You document your journey, and then you share in some way that journey with us online. And I think that it's just those simple steps of stepping outside of your comfort zone, doing something you wouldn't normally do. And I think that is a lot of what keeps people from doing projects that they know they're capable of doing, or doing projects for social good. It's just sort of doing that crazy thing. And the good thing about art is it kind of gives you an excuse to do something a little crazy. And so that's what I hear a lot from our audience, is people who say like, oh, I would have never done this, but if I did it and I was like, oh, it's for an art project, and suddenly it makes sense.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Keep up the wonderful work. We're pleased to have you under the umbrella of PBS.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.